This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Bruchim Abayim, Afreilichen, Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat Sameach. Thank you everybody for joining this morning. We have a very special Shiur. I'm just going to pull up the Maramakoimos here. You know, this morning, today's as it's Tu B'Shvat, so try to eat some fruits, and we know there's an idea that on Tu B'Shvat it's a siman of it's the day that it rises in the mind of Hashem to redeem Klal Yisrael. So we're looking for a siman that the Rebbeinu Shem should start the process of Geula for us. So I come home and I look out my back window. Last night apparently it was very windy. I slept very sound, but apparently it was very windy. And my next door neighbor has a big trampoline. And I see the trampoline is occupying my whole backyard. Apparently the wind was so powerful, the entire trampoline blew up. I don't know how it flew over the fence. It's in my backyard. Fine. So I realized it was very windy. So I'm eating breakfast. I look out the back window. And I look, what's in the backyard? What is that? It looks like a major honeycomb. Could it be? And I go outside, and sure enough, there's this huge honeycomb, with a bee's nest, a wasp nest, and it was beautiful. It's a work of architectural genius. So I go back and I say, you know what? I want to get up close. So I put on a pair of gloves, and I say, I want to show it to the Kollel Agar de Pirka, because they're not going to believe me that on Tu B'Shvat, the Rebbeinu Shalom sent down from Shamayim mamish honey, mamish dvash misela. So here we have it. You saw it here first. Agar de Pirka National, Tavshin Pei Beis. Here it is. This is, I put in plastic because my wife didn't want to have it's actually a wasp's honeycomb. So here it is, on Tu B'Shvat, it came down min Hashamayim. So that's a very nice siman. And you know, it's interesting. Every year on Shabbos Shira, I can't explain it, we have these two red cardinals. They come and they park themselves in our backyard. Where they come from, how they know it's Shabbos Shira, I don't know. Maybe they know that, you know, I don't feed the birds on Shabbos Shira. Mishnah Berurah says you can't feed the birds. So you would think, okay, so the birds are not going to visit. No, they visit anyway. Every year Shabbos Shira. Sure enough, this year on Thursday, 2 days before Shabbos Shira, I'm walking home from Shacharis, and one of the red birds is parked on the front lawn. So I told my wife, you know, I think they're back. She said, no, it's not Shabbos Shira. I said, come on, it's the middle of the winter. 2 days, it's a Iber yard. 2 days off is pretty good. No, did not accept it. Sure enough, come home Shabbos morning, open up the back window, and you know who's on my backyard? There's a woodpecker. So we had a special guest, L'Kavet Shabbos Shira, a woodpecker. And then a minute later, both red cardinals made their annual Shabbos Shira appearance on our backyard. Okay, listen, I'm just telling you, Ma'isa Shahaya, Kachaya, telling you, L'Kavet Tu B'Shvat. Okay, here we go. We have an unbelievable Shiur that not only is relevant to the Yom Tov of Tu B'Shvat, but also for Parshas Yisroi, Haba Aleinu L'Toiva. I want to thank my dear friends of David Israeli who are sponsoring the Limudim of Chodesh Shvat, Lilo Nishmas, Meir Ben David, Nishmasai Tia Tzura B'Tzara Chaim. Okay, so
is it possible to enlarge a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
We're just gonna mute everyone. Okay. So now, we know that the Yom Tov of Tu B'Shvat is not really discussed too often in classic sources. In fact, it is not mentioned at all in Shas and Poskim. The what to do on Tu B'Shvat, nowhere. There's no Gemara, there's no Mishnah that says do X, do Y, eat this, eat that. It's not mentioned, not in Talmud Bavli, not in Talmud Yerushalmi, and in the entire Shulchan Aruch, it only mentions Tu B'Shvat 2 times. One time The Shulchan Aruch says that if you have a series of fast days, Mondays and Thursdays, and it falls out on Tu B'Shvat, so do you fast, do you not fast? And the other time is in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, that we don't say Tachnun on Tu B'Shvat. No mention is there's no mention of eating fruits, not eating fruits. There's no mention of Buxer. Why somebody would eat Buxer beats me. Never understood that. But and yet the Magen Avraham brings down in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, Noyagin ha'Ashkenazim laharbos b'minei perosh ha'olanos. The minhag of Ashkenazim is they eat many types of fruits on Tu B'Shvat, and the Magen Avraham quotes an earlier source, the Tikkun Yisaschar. Why would we eat fruits? Why should we eat fruits? What exactly is Tu B'Shvat? Tu B'Shvat is not a Yom Tif. You say Lam Natseach on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat seems to be merely a technical day in the calendar, because we know a person has to take Meiser off of his fruits, and one has to give Meiser on an annual basis. Moreover, you can't take off one year onto the other year. So we have to be able to define what is the line of demarcation. When does year A begin and year B start? So that is the famous machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in the opening Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah says in number 3, Be'echad B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah le'ilan kedivrei Beis Shammai. On the first day of Shvat is Rosh Hashanah for trees, in accordance with the words of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel oimrim b'chamish asarbai. Beis Hillel says on the 15th. Says Rashi, regarding what is it Rosh Hashanah la'ilanois. By the way, the Gra is bothered, and this is one of the most mysterious Gras I've ever seen. I have yet to find anyone who is able to explain it. I'm sure some of the Tamei Chachamim on the Shiur today will have a good shot, but I can't figure it out. The Gra says, Gra's bothered, why don't you say Tachnun on Tu B'Shvat? Because it's a Rosh Hashanah la'ilanois? So I'm saying, Rosh Chodesh Elul, you don't say Tachnun because it's Rosh Hashanah l'Maaseh Behema? Well, what Yom Tif element is there of the day of Tu B'Shvat? So the Gra says, since the other Rosh Hashanah mentioned in the Mishnah are Yomim Tovim, this is also a Yom Tif. Huh? The other Rosh Hashanah mentioned in the Mishnah are not Yomim Tovim. They happen to be, one is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which you don't say Tachnun anyway. One is, all the Rosh Hashanahs mentioned in the Mishnah have other reasons why you don't say Tachnun, other than the fact that they're a line of demarcation for something. So the Gra is very difficult to understand what he means, but be it as it may, Tu B'Shvat or Echad B'Shvat is seemingly merely a halachic line of demarcation regarding knowing when the old year ends for mice and the new year begins. Says Rashi, why is this the line of demarcation? Basically, the determining factor when it comes to Chas Maser is Chanata. Chanata means when the earliest stage of the development of the fruit, which I believe means when the flower falls off, and a little bit later on the Gemara on Daf Yadalid, the Gemara says, "My taima Amar Rav Amar Boisha Hol v'yatzu Rav Gishmei Shana." In other words, why is the line of demarcation either Rosh Chodesh Shvat or Tesvav B'Shvat? And the Gemara says, because the majority of the year has fallen. So what? Says Rashi, once the majority of the year has fallen, so the sap begins to rise in the tree, and now the chanota process begins, which means actually the blossom falls off, which is the earliest stage of development of the fruit, and therefore last year is over, the new year begins, and if you want to take off Meiser, you take off last year's from last year, and the new year from the new year. Any fruit that had chanata before Rosh Chodesh Shvat or before Tu B'Shvat, according to Beis Hillel, is last year's crop. Whatever fruit had chanata after Rosh Chodesh Shvat or Tu B'Shvat is this year's crop. So that is what Tu B'Shvat is. It does not seem to be a very inspiring day on the calendar. All it is a halachic line of demarcation regarding Hilchos Maser. By the way, the Aderes in his personal diary writes that the Yom Tif of Tu B'Shvat is not a real Yom Tif, but because we don't live in Eretz Yisrael, and we don't have a chance to be Mekayim Mitzvah Satuyos Ba'aretz, so Chazal made some kind of Yom Tif as a day to stop and remember the halachos Hatuyos Ba'aretz and to study Hilchos Zraim and Hilchos Masrois, and by doing so, this is Mekayim, the inyan of Aseh L'cha Tziyunim, to remember what was, and the halachos that will once again become relevant once we return to Eretz Yisrael. So, again, number one, what is so significant about Tu B'Shvat? But let's analyze some of the words of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Be'echad B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah La'ilan. First day of Shvat, Rosh Hashanah La'ilan. Now that's very peculiar. La'ilan. For the tree, it should say La'ilanois. After all, everything else mentioned in the Mishnah is plural. It says, Be'echad B'Nisan Rosh Hashanah Le'melachim V'larga'im Ulenetiyos. Everything else in the Mishnah and Rosh Hashanah on Daf Beis Amud Aleph is Lashon Rabim. Why all of a sudden, when it comes to trees, it doesn't say Ilan in singular? That's the first question on hand. That is the question of the Bnei Yissaschar. He says, Lo yamar lo ilanois k'vay ve'inach. Says the Bnei Yissaschar, the famous tradition that we have from the masters of Chasidus, that what do you do on Tu B'Shvat? You pray for a beautiful esrog, that when the time comes, even though we're in Shvat, and we're in the dead of winter, and there could be tornadoes outside, and the last thing on your mind is whether you're going to have a good esrog or not. No, you need to stop, drop, and pray for a good esrog. Why? Because now's the day that the sap is rising in the trees. So in your esrog orchard in Pardes Chazoinish, or in Italy, wherever you get your esrog from, the sap is starting to rise up in the tree. You want to make sure the tree has geshmaka sap, so you want to pray to God, Ribbono Shel Olam, make good, juicy sap rise up in my esrog tree, that I should have a beautiful esrog at the right time. Now, here's my question. Really? That's why the Tana said, Lo Ilan, to be merames, that you should daven for a particular fruit, namely for a good esrog. So the Tana changed his language to be merames to this little practiced custom of davening for a good tree. I mean, here it is, it's Tu B'Shvat. I don't have to worry about Sukkot for, another 8-9 months. So all of a sudden, the Tana is going to change the nusach from all the other lashonos in the Mishnah. L'rgaim, l'melachim, l'mayadas. La'ilan, to daven for a good esrog. I mean, is that really so vital and important on Tu B'Shvat to daven for a good esrog? Is that, let me ask you a question. If somebody didn't daven for a good esrog on Tu B'Shvat, is there something really they're missing in Tu B'Shvat? As we mentioned, not mentioned in Shas anything about what to do on Tu B'Shvat, and now you're saying the whole lashon of the Mishnah the Bnei Yissaschar are saying has been switched based on this little minhag. So we want to try to explain how this tefillah is more than just a small practiced custom, but it's more integral to the day of Tu B'Shvat than we could imagine. Reb Tzadok HaKohen, in the Pri Tzadik, he also is bothered by the Bnei Yissaschar's question why the Mishnah says La Ilan and not La Ilanois, following the pattern of all the other items mentioned in the Mishnah. And the Pri Tzadik, Reb Tzadok HaKohen, says as follows. He says the Mishnah wants to draw your attention to a particular tree. We know when other Mishnahs put in Gan Eden, the Ribbono Shel Olam said, Mikol eitz hagan achal ta'achel me'etz hadas toy v'ra lo yisoichlu mimenu. Even though the Torah calls it an eitz, the Gemara calls it a tree. The Gemara Brachas Daf Mem says, Ilan she'achal mimenu Adam HaRishon. Says the Reb Tzadok HaKohen, on Tu B'Shvat, which is the day, as we mentioned, the majority of the rain of the year has fallen, and the sap begins to rise up in the tree. So now it's an opportunity, as the new crop of fruit begins to develop for the upcoming year. We want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be mesakein, or allow us to be mesakein, the Eitz Hadas, the sin of the Eitz Hadas. So it says, Rosh Hashanah la Ilan. Ilan refers to Ilan she'achal Adam HaRishon. Because we know when Adam HaRishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, it brought klala to the world. The very ground was cursed, Arura Ha'adama. and all the fruit was cursed. Chazal say fruit lost its taste. It does not taste the way it tasted in Gan Eden. So therefore the Tana says Rosh Hashanah la ilan for the tree, because it wants to bring our attention, draw our attention to a very specific tree, namely Eitz Ilan Sha'achal Adam HaRishon. So again, that's very interesting. That seems to be a compelling remez of why the Tana said Ilan and not Ilanois. But why is Tu B'Shvat the designated day to be able to be mispalel, to correct the sin of the Eitz Hadas? I mean, it didn't happen on Tu B'Shvat. It happened about 4 months ago. It happened right before, on Rosh Hashanah, actually. So why would Tu B'Shvat be the designated day to rectify the sin of Adam HaRishon? So we have two mahalchim, basically, and why the Tana deviates from its regular lashon. One is the Bnei Yissaschar, that it's being merames to the custom of davening for a beautiful esrog on Tu B'Shvat. That's why it says Ilan. It's referring to the special Ilan, the Ilan that we do a mitzvah with. And the other reason is the reason of Reb Tzadok HaKohen, that Ilan refers to Ilan Sha'achal Adam HaRishon. But on that approach, we asked, why is Tu B'Shvat the day we rectify the sin of Adam HaRishon? So, I would like to share with you the amazing approach of one of the all-time great Geonim, HaRishon Engel. HaRishon Engel is Reb Shmuel Engel. Reb Shmuel Engel was nifter in 1935. He was involved in permitting many agunos to remarry after the First World War. He was mater more than 200 agunos. He was a rav in Dukla and Radomshil. He wrote 8 volumes, Shal Shachus HaRishon Engel. When he was a young boy, his mother went to the Divrei Chaim for a bracha. He said, what do you want? You want wealth? Or you want good, children who are Gedolei Yisrael? So the mother opted for Banim Gedolim, and that's what she got. Rabbi Yosef Engel testifies about Reb Shmuel Engel, that at age 14, Reb Shmuel Engel knew all the Tosusin and Shas. He was a great Makubal, he learned by Rabbi Baruch Halberstam, but he hid that branch of wisdom. Says Reb Shmuel Engel, Parshas B'Shalach, another diuk in the Mishnah. This is a very important diuk. When the Mishnah discusses Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the Mishnah uses a very unusual phrase. The Mishnah says, Be'echad B'Shvat Rosh Hashanah Lilan Kid Divrei Beis Shammai. On the first day of Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Lilan is Kid Divrei Beis Shammai. It doesn't say Divrei Beis Shammai like it ordinarily would say. It says Kid Divrei Beis Shammai. As if this view of Beis Shammai, that Rosh Chodesh Leilanos is Aleph Shvat, is in accordance with Beis Shammai's worldview and in accordance with his general shita. Why doesn't it just say Divrei Beis Shammai? What's the Kid Divrei Beis Shammai? That's the kasha of HaRishon Engel. So HaRishon Engel offers the following principle. He says that whenever something is brought into this world, we never know if it is coming to fruition until a third of it passed. The third way mark is a sort of line of demarcation that we know, okay, this matter is being materialized, it's coming to concretization. For example, the Gemara in Yevamos, the Gemara says in Daf Lamed Zayin, an ubar is nikar after 3 months. Or the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Beis, when determining whether something grew during Shemitah, we say that if it grew a third before Rosh Hashanah, it's last year's crop. If it grew a third after Rosh Hashanah, it's this year's crop. Or we could add, when is food considered cooked? There's an opinion, Kamachal ben Drusai, when it's cooked a third. A third is a certain amount that the item has come into being that we could say, yes, this item has materialized. And therefore, we could say, says HaRishon Engel, based on the following amazing idea that is probably well known to you, of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Bar Ditchev. We know the Gemara says, the Chumash says, in Parshas Emma, regarding the mitzvah of taking the Daled Minim, V'lakachtem lachem b'yom HaRishon, you should take on the first day. And the Medrash asks, hey, wait a second, you don't take the Daled Minim on the first day of Tishrei, you take it on the 15th day. And the Medrash famously comments, Rishon l'cheshbon avonos, that the first day of Sukkot is the first day that God starts counting sin. It's the first opportunity to sin after Yom Kippur. Asks the Kedushas Levi, what do you mean it's the first opportunity to sin after Yom Kippur? The moment you say Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, and right before V'huracham, that's the first moment you could sin after Yom Kippur. So the Kedushas Levi says, Rishon l'cheshbon avonos, it's the first time God starts counting sin, because there are two periods of tshuva in the year. There's the tshuva of Rosh Hashanah, which is called tshuva miyira, and there's the tshuva of Sukkot, which is known as tshuva me'ahava. Now, so long as all we're doing is tshuva miyira, we don't want God to count our sin, because even if we do tshuva, the tshuva merely downgrades the sin from mezid to shoygeg. But the sin is still extant, it's still around, it still exists, and therefore we prefer that God does not count it. However, we know Sukkot is man simchasenu. Sukkot is the time that we serve Hashem out of joy, out of love. And if we're serving Hashem out of love, then our tshuva is motivated by ahava. And we know Rish Lakish says, Yuma daf pevav, somebody does tshuva me ahava, zedoinos nasas like kizchuyos, your intentional sins are considered like merit, considered like mitzvah. Therefore, on Sukkot, Hashem starts counting our sin, because it's to our benefit that Rebbeinu Shem starts counting our sin, because now our sin will be transformed into mitzvahs. Before Sukkot, we're not up to the madrega of Avas Hashem yet. So we're not up to the madrega of Avas, so we don't want Hashem to count our sin, because it's going to work to our detriment, because even if we do tshuva, the tshuva will merely downgrade the sin to shoygeg. But come Sukkot, where we're serving Hashem out of simcha, out of ahava, so then it's to our benefit that Rebbeinu Shem counts our sin, and therefore the first day of Sukkot, says Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, is Rishon l'cheshbon avonos. Comes Maharash Engel, and he says, Davar oyoim v'noira. That means there are two kinds of tshuva. Tshuva of Yira, Rosh Hashanah, tshuva of Ahava, Sukkot. When can we know if our tshuva is successful or not? Because let's think for a moment. What exactly are we doing tshuva for on Rosh Hashanah? Aside from our personal sins, we know that every Rosh Hashanah we need to rectify the greatest sin of all time, the sin that caused the world to plummet into death and into klala, and that is the sin of Adam HaRishon. We know Adam HaRishon sinned on the very first day of creation. We know that the Medrash gives us an hour-by-hour account of the first day of creation, and on the very first day, Adam was created, and on that first day, Chazal tell us that he ate from the Eitz Hadas. So that means every Rosh Hashanah and every Sukkot, it is incumbent upon us to try to rectify the sin of Adam HaRishon. On Rosh Hashanah we do tshuva miyira for the sin of Adam HaRishon, and on Sukkot we do tshuva me'ahava for the sin of Adam HaRishon. Now, if I were to ask you, which kind of tshuva is a better tshuva? Which kind of tshuva is the primary tshuva? Which kind of tshuva is the tshuva that we are hoping for, is our goal? The answer is, it depends. Is tshuva miyira greater, or is tshuva me'ahava greater? Well, says Marash Engel, wait a second. It depends whether Yira Shamayim is greater than Avas Hashem. And to that he directs us to the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos. The Gemara says in Daf Lamed Aleph, a story. What's the story? The story is that a guy came before Shammai and he said, Rabbi, convert me while I'm standing on one foot. So Beis Shammai took a baseball bat, he took the amas of it, he said, I'm going to clobber you over the head, get out of here, get lost. What kind of chutzpah is that? I should tell you the whole Torah is standing on one foot. I'm already spending my whole life learning Torah, I haven't even got into the lowest madreg of understanding Torah. You want to know the whole Torah on one foot? Get out of here. And what does Beis Hillel say? Beis Hillel is very patient with him. Beis Hillel says, "Ta'alach sani l'charvach le'saved." Don't do someone else to someone else what you wouldn't want someone to do to you. Zuhi kol ha'Torah v'idach parash zil gemara. Go learn the rest. Go figure out the rest. Says Rashi. Rashi says, what was Hillel telling the ger? Hillel was telling the ger that the primary principle of the Torah is v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. Asks Rashi, what do you mean v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha is not the whole Torah? V'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha is only a good chunk of the Torah. Says Rashi, no. V'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha is the whole Torah. Because who's your best friend? Who's your best friend? The guy who was your friend in elementary school? You haven't seen him in 30 years. Who's your best friend? The guy who lives across the street from you? He spends half the year in Florida. He doesn't even know what you're doing half the year. Who is your best friend? The guy down the block? The guy down the block, he's dead already 10 years. What do you mean he's your best friend? A person only has one true good friend in this world, the Ribbon Shalom. The Ribbon Shalom is your best friend. Re'acha v're'ach avicha al ta'azov. God is your best friend. He's been looking out for you from the day you were born. He always prepares in advance situations for your benefit, and even when it seems like something is a challenge, it's really to elevate you and give you bracha. God is your best friend. Therefore, every mitzvah in the Torah is a kima v'ahavta l'recha kamaycha. The same way, if you would ask your friend to do something, you would want your friend to do it. So when your friend, God, asks you to do something, you should do it. And what does Beis Shammai hold? Why doesn't Beis Shammai hold that? Why didn't Beis Shammai give the ger a drasha? Says Marash Engel, this is the fundamental machloikis Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. What's more important? Av or yira, love or fear? Because we know, I have a question for you. The Gemara in Yevamos has a shaila. Daf Daled. If you have tzitzis which are linen and you want to put wool strings, do we say asay doicha lois asay when it comes to tzitzis? So we know, the Gemara in Yevamos says, that we learn out asay doicha lois asay from the juxtaposition of leisilba shatnis, gedilim taselacha. That even though you're not allowed to wear shatnis, but the mitzvah of tzitzis is doicha the yisr of shatnis. Asay doicha loisas. But Marv Rabbi said, Beis Shammai holds that we don't darshan smuchim. Beis Shammai holds asay is not doicha lois asay. Why is it, Rabbi say, that Beis Hillel holds asay is doicha lois asay, and Beis Shammai holds asay is not doicha lois asay? Comes the Ramban in this week's Parsha, Parshas Yisro, and the Ramban says, we have two mitzvahs in the Torah by Shabbos, Zachar and Shamar. Why do we need two mitzvahs? Says the Ramban. I want to show you on the sheet. It's number 11 on the sheet. The Ramban says, Zachar is ahava. Do the positive commands which emanate from love. Shamar is don't violate the Shabbos, that emanates from fear. Now what's greater, love or fear? Says the Ramban, if asay is doicha lois asay, that means ahava is greater than yira. You know why asay is doicha lois asay? Because avas Hashem is a greater madrega than yiras Hashem. So since Abba is greater than you, now, you'll say, but what do you mean? If you violate a lav, you get punished. If you don't fulfill an asay, you don't get punished. Doesn't that mean that a lav is greater than an asay? That fear is greater than love? No, just the opposite, says the Ramban. Love is a higher level. So if you violate a lav, that means you don't have even the lower level, you get punished. But if you don't fulfill the asay, which is love, so you're not on the higher level of fulfillment of an asay. Asay is a much higher level. Ahava is a higher level. That's why if you don't fulfill an asay, you don't get punished. What could you do? You're not on such a high level. But you're not even on the low level of not violating a lav? Ooh, says Maharash Engel. But Beis Shammai holds asay is not doicha lois asay. Why? Because Beis Shammai holds that yira is greater than ahava. And if yira is greater than ahava, that means that asay is not doicha lois asay pushes away an asay. Therefore, when the ger comes to Hillel and he says, teach me the whole Torah, Hillel says, I'll tell you the whole Torah. All you need to know is love Hashem. Because Hillel is a man of love. That Rizal says that the Shirish Neshama of Hillel was from Chesed. So Hillel was able to sum up the whole Torah in one line. V'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. But Shammai would never say v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. You know why Shammai would never say v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha? Because he doesn't believe that ahava is the primary principle of the Torah. So basically Beis Shammai said, get lost. I can't teach you the whole Torah standing on one foot. Your request is a fundamental violation of the principles of yira and awe and the reverence needed to learn Torah. But Hillel's a man of love. Hillel holds aseh is doicha lo isaseh. Hillel could tell the ger the whole Torah is v'ahavta l'recha kamecha. Now, Hillel is an ahava man. Shammai is a yira man. If we were to ask them, which is the main teshuvah of the year? Rosh Hashanah, tshuva miyira, or Sukkot, tshuva me'ava? What do you think they would say? They would say, Lishitasam. Beis Shammai would say, the main teshuvah is tshuva miyira, Rosh Hashanah. Beis Hillel would say the main tshuva is tshuva me'ava, Sukkot. Now, when will it be recognized and realized, and when will it come to fruition, whether we were successful in the tshuva that we did in Chodesh Tishrei? It will become realized 4 months later, a third into the year. Therefore, when is Rosh Hashanah La'ilan? Meaning, when can we determine whether the tshuva that we did in the month of Tishrei came to materialization, was concretized? The answer is, it's a machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Rosh Hashanah Ilana says Beis Shammai be'echad b'shvat kidivrei Beis Shammai. Says the Mishnah be'echad b'shvat Rosh Hashanah Ilan kidivrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai's view that Rosh Hashanah Ilan is the first day of Shvat is in concordance with everything Beis Shammai believes, namely that the main principle of Avodas Hashem is Yiras Shamayim, and therefore the Ikar Tshuva for the Chet of Adam HaRishon is Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we understand Reb Tzadok HaKohen that the day that it comes to realization and fulfillment, whether we were successful in doing tshuva for the sin of Adam HaRishon, is Nikar 4 months later, 1/3 into the year, on when Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Kidivrei Beis Shammai. This is in accordance with Beis Shammai's general worldview that Yira is Ikar and Ahava is secondary. But not so Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel would say the Ikar Teshuvah of the year was Sukkot, because Hillel is a Sukkot man. I don't know that we have too many statements of what Hillel said on Rosh Hashanah, but Hillel was definitely a Sukkot man. Hillel is the one who said him, Ani kan hakoil kan. By the way, Ani refers, we learned on last Wednesday, refers to the Ahava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Hillel, who is an Ahava man, he's the Shita Aseh is doichel aseh. He would hold that the tshuva of Adam HaRishon comes to recognition and realization 4 months later, 4 months from Sukkot. What's 4 months from Sukkot? Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the day that it comes to materialization, whether in fact we were masaking the sin of Adam HaRishon. Now, fasten your seatbelts. Now we understand why the Tana is focused on Elon, the sin of Adam HaRishon. What does Tu B'Shvat got to do with the sin of Adam HaRishon? As we mentioned, because we don't know, we're not clear if something comes to fruition until 4 months later. 4 months after Tishrei Shvat. Beis Shammai says Echad B'Shvat in the world of Yira. Beis Hillel says Tu B'Shvat in the world of Ava. Next, let's move on to the Bnei Yissaschar, who references that one should pray, one should daven for a beautiful esrog on Tu B'Shvat. That's why it says Elon, and we asked, is that really so fundamental to the avodah of Tu B'Shvat, to daven for a nice esrog? Mar Rabbi say, if Tu B'Shvat is the day that we have to give an accounting of whether we're being successful in rectifying the sin of Adam HaRishon, we know there's one principle that we have regarding judgment days. And that is, whenever we're being judged, we always want to serve Hashem with the item that we're being judged as a manner of appeasing Hashem in that item, that Hashem should give us a good din regarding that item. For example, the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says, why do we bring the Omer on Pesach? The Gemara says, look at number 19, because on Pesach we're judged for grain, so therefore we serve Hashem with grain, so Hashem should bless our grain on Pesach. And why do we bring the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos? Because since we're judged on fruits, so we serve Hashem with fruits on Shavuos. And why do we serve Hashem with water on Sukkot? You ever wonder? The rest of the year we're pouring wine on the Mizbeach. Why do we pour water on Sukkot? Because since we're being judged on water, we want to serve Hashem with water as a way of appeasing Hashem, that the Rebbe Hashem should grant us a good year of water. So perhaps then we could suggest, what is the judgment of Tu B'Shvat? Tu B'Shvat is it's being determined whether we are successful in rectifying the sin of Adam HaRishon. What was the sin of Adam HaRishon? Ilan sha'achal Adam HaRishon. What was the tree that Adam HaRishon ate from? Well, the Medrash brings an opinion. Look at number 18. Ma haya oisa ilan sha'ach meno Adam HaChava. Rabbi Abba da'aki omer, Esroig haya! It's an esroig! Because it says, Vatera isha ki toiv ha'etz. The tree was good. What tree is not only the fruit good, but the tree is good, the esroig. So that means if the Eitz Hadas was an esroig, and on Tu B'Shvat where it's being determined whether we're being successful in rectifying the sin that was done with the esroig, and we already know that the tactic we always like to use is whenever we're being judged on something, we try to serve Hashem with that item. So how could we serve Hashem with an esroig on Tu B'Shvat? You're not going to shake Daled Minim. There's no mitzvah of Daled Minim on Tu B'Shvat. This is the Oimek HaKavana of what the Bnei Yissaschar writes. By the way, the Ben Ish Chai composed a special tefillah to say to daven for a beautiful esrog. If anybody wants, we could send it to you. It's in our Sefer on Tu B'Shvat, the light and the splendor. Or if you're on the email list, I believe we sent it out. Why did the Ben Ish Chai, why did the Bnei Yissaschar recommend that you should daven for a beautiful esrog on Tu B'Shvat? The answer is because since on this day it's being determined whether we're successful, whether the tshuva that we did for the sin of Adam HaRishon was accepted or not. So the tactic that we employ to try to appease Hashem regarding this item is by serving Hashem with that item. How can we serve Hashem with the esrog on Tu B'Shvat? The answer is by being mispala, that the Rebbe Hashem should be mazmin to us a beautiful esrog. That is the manner with which we appease Hashem for the Eitz Hadas on the day that it comes to fruition, whether we were successful in rectifying the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Now that we're in the Garden of Eden, one last item to bring you into the next Zman of the year. So Chava is walking in the garden, and the snake says, "Hey, Chava, what's going on?" Chava says, "Good. Was macht der Nachash?" So the Nachash says, what's that tree in the middle? Chava says, "No, God said, if we eat it, we're going to die. We're going to die." The snake says, you won't die, surely, you won't die, surely die. And what does Chava do? She eats the snake. She eats the fruit. I have a question. You come into the house and there's a fruit on the counter. There's a scientist in the house. He says, "I just did a study on this apple, and I've determined it's poisonous. You eat it, you die in 3 seconds." I took it to my lab, and there's arsenic in the apple. A few minutes later, the plumber walks in. The plumber says, how come you're not eating the apple? Said, the scientist told me that there's poison in it. Plumber says, what does he know about biology? It doesn't look like there's any poison to me. Would anybody in their right mind eat the apple? I mean, even if it's 50-50, forget about the fact the scientist told you there's poison and the plumber told you it's not poison. So who are you going to listen to? But even if it's 50, even if you have a 1% chashash, you're not going to put your life in jeopardy. God told Chava, you're going to die. The snake told her she's not going to die. At least let it be 50-50. So Sheva al Tasa, why is she listening to the snake? Asks Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz another diak. God told Adam and Chava, B'yoyim achol chamimenu, Mois Tamos, you're going to die, surely die, 2 times. Chava tells the Nachash, we can't eat it. God said the day we eat it, we're going to die 1 time. The snake says, no, you're not going to die twice. Loi Mois Tamosan. What did God mean when he said you're going to die twice? Why did Chava say, no, we're only going to die once? Why did the snake say, no, you're not going to die twice? Says the Rebbe Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Chava and Adam and Chava thought that the reason why they can't eat from the trees, this is the Eitz HaDas. Now they already had a lot of das. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu had 49 levels of das, like the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Yud Aleph, then so did they. If Moshe Rabbeinu had 49 levels of das, then certainly Adam and Chava, the Yitzir Kapav Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they also had 49 levels of das. You know why Moshe and Adam did not have the 50th level of das? The 50th level of das is seeing Hashem. V'lo yarani ha'adam v'chai. That level of clarity is not within the human being's capabilities to have. The human being does not have the faculties to exist seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowing Hashem on the 50th level. Adam thought that when God said, don't eat from the tree, what kind of tree is this? This is the tree of Das. This is the 50th level of Das. Adam figured it's not a punishment if we eat from the tree that we're going to die. It's a natural consequence because lo yarani ha'adam v'chai. But Adam HaRishon said, it's worth it. It's worth it. I'll look at the tree. I'll understand the 50th level of wisdom. Thereby I'll be elevated to the highest levels of ruchnias. My soul will leave my body. And then I'll go to Olam Haba and I'll continue to bask in Lachsois b'noyam Hashem u'levaker b'heichaloi. I'll be l'saneg al Hashem u'lehanos miziv shchinasoi. Shezeu ha'tainig amiti v'o'idin ha'gadol mikol ha'idun shem chayim li'matzei. Adam HaRishon said, if that's a natural consequence, then that's worth it. My whole life is to come to a clear recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But he made a mistake because God didn't say you're going to die naturally as a natural consequence by eating from the Eitz HaDas. God said you're going to die twice. Once in this world as a natural consequence, and you'll lose your share in the world to come. But the Nachash tells Chava, nah, you're not going to die twice. Don't worry. You're just going to, your soul will leave the body because it's the 50th level of wisdom. But you're not going to die in Olam Haba. That is why Chava and Adam, they misinterpreted what God said. They thought they would only die once in this world, and the Nachash confirmed it. Loi mois tamusa. Marv Rabbi said, you know who else tried to use this trick of tapping into this source of Misa? The very embodiment of the Nachash. Haman. Haman, the Shlach HaKadosh tells us, many Svarim write, was the very embodiment of the Nachash. Haman wanted to kill the Jewish people, but how's he going to kill them? They were tzaddikim. Similar, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says, when the Arizal was maspid Reb Moshe Cordovero, he gave the following hesped. He said, the pasuk says, Kiyeh be'ish chet mishpat maves v'humas v'salisa oisai aleitz. He interpreted it as following. Literally it means, if a person will have a capital offense, v'humas, and you hang him on a tree, don't leave him hanging overnight. However, the Arizal interpreted, Kiyeh be'ish chet. The word chet could mean missing. Like, Koileya el hasa'ara v'layachta. If a man will be missing, mishbat maves, a reason to die, v'humas, and he dies anyway. Sometimes you see a tzaddik. They didn't do any avera. So why'd they die? So the pasuk says, v'chiyeh be'ish chet mishbat maves. If a man will be missing a reason to die, v'humas, and he'll still die, v'salisa oisai aleitz. Blame it on the sin of Adam HaRishon who ate from the Eitz HaDas. Sometimes a person will not have any sin other than the fact that he is a descendant of Adam HaRishon. So Haman realized that the Jews had not committed any sin that they would be worthy of destruction. So he needed to tap into that primordial sin, the sin of Achila, to drum up the Eitz HaDas. Again, what was the Eitz HaDas? The Eitz HaDas was the Shar Nun. Says Haman, Yasu Eitz Gavai Ah Chamishim Amma. Why 50 Amos? He wanted to mimic the technique of the Nachash who tried to kill Adam with the Shar Nun of Das. How did he? Through Achila. So Haman seduces Klal Yisrael to eat at the Suda, that would be reminiscent of the Achila of the Eitz Hadas, which is the Shar Nun. That was the union of the Eitz Gavoya Chamishim Ama. That is why the Gemara in Chulin asks, Haman min ha-Torah minayin? Hamin ha'etz. What does that mean, Hamin ha'etz? Just because the letters He Mem Nun appear by the Eitz Hadas, that's a remez to Haman? Where does Haman have to do with the Eitz Hadas? The answer is, Haman min ha-Torah minayin. Where did Haman, was he yoinek? What was his source that he would be able to kill the Jewish people, chas v'shalom, al yedei achila? The answer is, he was trying to mimic the Eitz Hadas. Yasu eitz gavoya chamishim ama. Therefore, on Purim, Sudas Purim is a tikkun for being nana from the Suda of Achashverosh, and a tikkun for the chait of the Eitz Hadas. On Purim is a tikkun for the chait of the Eitz Hadas. Haman tried to stir up, be ma'oira, the sin of the Eitz Hadas, and we have to be misakin that on Purim. Really? So if Purim is a day, we have to be misakin the chait of the Eitz Hadas. And we know the spiritual influence of a Yom Tov begins 30 days before. So on what day of the year do we start to try to rectify Peiros? Do we start to try to rectify the Esroig? Do we start to try to focus on Elon, Sha'achal Adam HaRishon, says in Reinayim of Jacob, the same way 30 days before every Yom Tov, the spiritual effects of the Yom Tov begin to stick out, begin to stretch out its embrace. 30 days before the Yom Tov of Purim, which is the day that we rectify the sin of Adam, that Haman tried to be Ma'orer, we start that on Tu B'Shvat, which is Shloishim Yom Koidem HaChag. And I guess this year we have 2 Adars, so this process we have an extra 30 days to do a real good job rectifying the sin of Adam HaRishon. So here it is, on this great day of Tu B'Shvat, that again we mentioned, all we find in Shulchan Aruch is that we don't say Tachnun, or we don't fast on Tu B'Shvat. Nevertheless, the Magen Avram brings that Minhag HaAshkenazim is Laharbois Bepeiros, and from a few insinuations of the Mishnah, it says Rosh Hashanah La Ilan, which reminds us of the sin of Adam HaRishon, which reminds us to be Mispalel for an Esrog No'eh. Kid Divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, who's a man of Yira, he's going to say the Ikar Tshuva is 4 months later. Echad B'Shvat, says Marash Engel. But Beis Hillel, who's a man of Ahava, who holds Aseh Doicha Lo Yisaseh, who told the Ger, My Dalach Sani L'Charach Lo Yisavid, he's a man of Ahava. So for Hillel, the Ikar Tshuva is Sukkos, which comes to realization 4 months later on Tu B'Shvat. And then we begin the process that we hope to complete on Purim. On Purim, we destroy the Kayach HaTumah completely. We destroy Haman. We destroy the Nachash in preparation for Benisan Nivra Ha'olam, Benisan Nigal Yisami Mitzrayim, Uvenisan Asidon Ligal. Says the Kloisenberger Rebbe, that according to the opinion that the world was created in Nisan, Rabbi Yeshua holds that the Geula will happen in Nisan. If the Geula will happen in Nisan, that means the 6-day process begins Chav Hei Adar. And 40 days before is the day that it rises up in the mind of Hashem to redeem the Jewish people. 40 days before Chav Hei Adar is Tu B'Shvat. On this day, as the Saraf is Oila Be'ilan, it's also Oila B'Machshavta Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, according to Shitas Rabbi Yeshua, Ligal Es Yisrael. May we taka be zoicha to that geula b'mher yameinu. Amen. Thanks everyone for joining. If anybody wants to join on this same Zoom 5 p.m. today, Orchos Chaim of the Rush, you're cordially invited. Have a good day. Afreilachen. Kol tov. Kol tov, everyone. Bye-bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.